Today we're going to tackle a really fascinating topic. It's all about where personal dreams, modern medicine, and big government decisions collide. The question of whether elective egg freezing should get financial support here in Singapore.
You know, for so many women today, this isn't just some abstract question. It's the reality of their 20s and 30s. As more women are building amazing careers and, deciding to start families a little later, the whole idea of preserving fertility has just exploded into the mainstream conversation.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the dilemma itself. Then, the costs and the rules as they stand today. We'll explore some ideas from the government and the private sector. After that, we'll get into the really controversial ethical stuff. And finally, wrap it all up.
So why is this suddenly such a big deal? Well, it's pretty simple, really. Women are pursuing higher education and climbing the career ladder like never before, and that's naturally shifting the timeline for starting a family. And because of that, fertility preservation has become a major topic for everyone.
Okay, before we dive deeper, let's just get on the same page. When we say elective egg freezing, we're talking about a choice made for personal reasons. Maybe you're focused on your job or you haven't met the right person yet. This is different from freezing eggs for urgent medical reasons like before cancer treatment.
All right, now that we've got the what and the why, let's look at the how. Specifically, how does this actually work in Singapore right now? And, well, the short answer is, it is not cheap.
Okay, so here's the rundown. The procedure is allowed for women between 21 and 37, and it doesn't matter if you're married or not. But here is the big catch. Because it's considered elective, there are zero government subsidies. You can't touch your MediSave funds for it. So basically, unless you're lucky enough to have an employer who offers it as a benefit, you are completely on your own. It's a choice, but only for those who can foot the pretty hefty bill.
And that huge financial wall leads us to our first big question. Should the government get involved at all? Let's take a look at a few ways public policy could, maybe, make this more accessible.
So the most obvious path is direct subsidies. And the argument for it is strong, right? It could make access more fair, maybe even help the national birth rate. But it gets tricky, fast. How do you justify spending public money on something that isn't medically essential? You'd probably need super strict rules to control costs, which raises a whole other set of questions about fairness.
Okay, so what if we let women use their own money from their MediSave accounts? I mean, that doesn't cost taxpayers a cent. The problem here is you'd be dipping into funds that are meant for crucial healthcare down the road. And you'd be using it on a procedure with a really uncertain outcome. What's wild is that most women who freeze their eggs actually never end up using them.
And this is where things get really stark. Look at that number. A 2 to 12% success rate per egg. This is not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination. It's a roll of the dice. And this low success rate is a huge reason why using those essential health savings is so controversial.
There might be a much simpler government option on the table. Just offer low-interest loans. This would help with that big upfront cost without the government directly paying for it. It kind of frames it more like an investment in your future, almost like a student loan.
So if all the government options are so tangled up in red tape and ethical questions, what about the free market? Could the private sector, maybe companies, offer a better solution?
You've probably seen the headlines about big tech companies offering egg freezing as a perk. And on the surface, it seems like a huge win-win. It's a great way to attract and keep talented women, but it sends a really mixed message, doesn't it? Does it empower women, or does it kind of pressure them to put work ahead of family? It could even imply that the company isn't actually that friendly to working moms.
And this quote just nails it. When your company is paying, it can create this false sense of security. You start to think of it as an insurance policy, something that guarantees you a family later. But the reality, when you look at those success rates, is that it's much, much closer to being a lottery ticket.
All right, now we're going to venture into the most ethically complicated part of this whole debate, the idea of sharing eggs between women. This is where the personal and financial stakes just get incredibly high.
So first up, you have these freeze and share schemes. Let me break down how it works. A woman who wants to freeze her own eggs gets the whole expensive procedure paid for by an infertile patient. In return, she agrees to donate some of the eggs they retrieve to that patient.
Now, the appeal is obvious. It doesn't cost the government a dime, and it helps two people at once. But the ethical risks here are massive. That financial help could feel like pressure, pushing a woman into a pretty invasive medical procedure. And just imagine, what if her own frozen eggs don't work out later, but her donated eggs gave someone else a child? The potential for real psychological distress is huge.
And the dangers here go surprisingly deep. I mean, we're talking about everything from family law to market forces. In a world with commercial DNA tests, the whole idea of an anonymous donor is basically a thing of the past. That creates some seriously complex social risks our laws just aren't ready for. And at the same time, you risk creating a marketplace for certain desirable genetic traits, which leads us down a pretty uncomfortable road.
A slightly different idea is letting women get reimbursed for the procedure if they decide to donate their unused eggs later. Now, people who support this are very careful to call it a refund, not a payment. But critics say that this could exploit women at a really vulnerable time, pressuring them to donate just to get their money back, a decision that could lead to some serious regret.
So, as you can see, every single path we've looked at is just full of complications. From government money to company perks to these sharing schemes, there is no simple, perfect answer here.
Ultimately, this entire debate just boils down to a really delicate balancing act. It's about weighing a woman's right to choose for herself, for her body and her future, against some very real ethical dangers, the question of who pays, and what it all means for society as a whole.
And that really leaves us with this final question. Technology has given us incredible new choices, but it has not given us easy answers. As we figure all this out, deciding exactly where we draw that line, well, that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing today.